on for direct spend. You know, for lack of better words, and there are a bunch I can think of, but really disjointed and archaic is what comes to mind. Not only, you know, the way we look at it, but we've heard this routinely from the groups that we work with. And it's because procurement typically has 4 main needs that they've identified to us. Now, your organization may have more than these 4, but I'm sure these are going to resonate with you. You know, and the first is that you need consistency. And your procurement team, whether it's one buyer working with 10 suppliers or 10 buyers working with hundreds of suppliers in different locations, there needs to be a uniform manner and a consistent method in which the communication is taking place on your POs with those suppliers. And so that is key, just right out of the box, that consistency needs to be available, something that you can manage to. Now, speaking of management, the second piece and key element is exception management. And it's all about your team and Chase. And I'm sorry, somebody, I thought I've muted everybody, but somebody has, if somebody could mute in the background. I'm hearing a lot of noise, okay. Is tied to exception management. And think about the amount of time that your team spends playing chase. You know, trying to track down a piece of information that they may already have somewhere, trying to answer a question internally. It could be answered very easily if somebody, you know, knew where to look for that answer. So it's all about placing your time and effort where it's required. And then ultimately accountability. I'm sure every single person on this call at some time has sat in a meeting and said, wait, who agreed to this? When did we agree to this? And how did this happen? Because there's no complete audit trail. Maybe it was something that was done verbally. Maybe it was something done via email, but it was not something that's easy to track and easy to pull up. So accountability is that third key procurement feature that people continue to point out to us. And then ultimately, from a management standpoint, visibility. You know, the toughest thing about making decisions is getting the right data to make those decisions. And if you can't make data-informed decisions, if you don't have the data available to you. And so our platform is going to enable that visibility across all levels of management into the platform so that you can make the right decisions utilizing the right data points. So if we start to go through and think about what I've just talked about today, and that, you know, for lack of better words, it's very disjointed and archaic. If we start to look at the solution itself and the current process, as I mentioned, very, very disjointed. You have some individuals who may be picking up the phone and calling a supplier and asking about a PO. You may have others who email. You may have some who send spreadsheets. You may even have suppliers that you work with who require a fax. And then when they're getting back to you, they're doing that in multiple fashions as well. So whether you're requesting information on a quote or an acknowledgement or a change, it's really a hodgepodge of communication methods that's happening. And if you really start to think about it, just how you were communicating in the 80s and 90s and 2000s is exactly how you're doing it today. Yet technology has changed rapidly. So that's where we step into the mix. And the SourceDay solution, to put it succinctly, is that supplier communication and collaboration portal that's going to exist in the cloud that sits between you and your suppliers. And so what we do with the assistance of great partners like PeopleSense is there's an integration that would be built into your ERP, which is going to pull out all the necessary information I'll show you through the demo that your team would be utilizing when that PO is firmed and released. That's going to be communicated to the supplier so that they know that they need to take action and come into the portal and work on that PO, whether it's giving an acknowledgement, whether it is requesting a change to a particular PO that your team will have the ability to either approve or reject, whether it's looking at their scorecard. Once again, bringing that all together in one common place in the cloud for communication and collaboration. Now, a key element of what I just mentioned is that not only would your buyers be in this and your management team and your expediters, but also your suppliers. And something that we do as part of our platform is that we onboard all of your suppliers at absolutely no cost to the supplier, which is a key differentiator between anything else out there. And we have a very tried and true methodology with how, when we bring on a client base, We ultimately have a reach out that goes to the supplier, and we set up trainings with them and continue to work on them, starting with really your tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 suppliers to ensure that they get on board to the platform, that they understand what's expected of them, and that they know that they have somebody, and this is another key element, supporting them 24/7. So we remove the lift completely from your shoulders when it comes to your supplier base. We're going to onboard, train them, and support them. And we see a tremendous success rate for our clients right now, north of 90% in bringing on their suppliers. Around this time, I typically would get a question where someone would say, hey, why is it not 100%? Well, you're always going to have those onesie, twosie suppliers that may get a couple POs a year where it just doesn't make sense. You might have those that are technology averse. In some cases, we've heard that, some organizations are sunsetting, or, management's moving out. So they just don't need the technology or come on to it. Yet you can still manage that, those that don't come on to the platform through our platform. And I'll show you how to do that during the demo. As I mentioned, a key element and differentiator in what we do is this supplier onboarding, support, and training. And there are tremendous benefits that these suppliers see from it. The first is it's going to be simplified communication to them. They know exactly what's expected of them. They know when they're notified that there's a PO that they need to take action on, where to go in this one portal. And we're starting to see, because we've grown exponentially, that network effect where there are a lot of suppliers out there that are working with multiple clients in the portal. So they live in our platform all day. And it allows them to know really where things are within the system so that there's no missed POs, what they owe action on. And then ultimately, there's a scorecard that's built into the platform. And I really like to think of this, if anybody, the Uber and the Lyft effect, if you use ride sharing, you know what your score is. You want to see what your score is, and you want to make sure it doesn't dip below a certain point. Same type of thing here. These suppliers want to know what they're being measured to and have access to that real-time scorecard, which they will in the system. And then ultimately, some things that we're starting to release around AP automation will be coming out next year, which, as you can think about it, a supplier would love the benefit of being able to get paid on time. And so it's an amazing benefit to them. So right out of the box, when I show this demo, you're going to start to visualize some of this impact when it comes to ROI. And the first and foremost that we have documented is the time savings that you're going to see per buyer per week. At a minimum, we're seeing 2 hours a day being given back to a buyer to focus on other items that might be falling through the cracks. So if you start to think about your organization and what your team could do with extra time given back, or focus on those initiatives that you just haven't had time for, that is a tremendous ROI right there. You're also going to know 100% of the time where your purchase order lines sit. Have they been acknowledged? Have they been updated? Is this tracking to be delivered when I expect it to be delivered? It's no more guessing game where you have to search through your email. It's something that you can go look at and know 100% with surety where your ERP, your purchase order lines sit. And this is going to lead to a tremendous improvement in your on-time deliveries. So if you start to think about wait lines, a lot of times when a line falls late, it could have tremendous downstream ramifications. There's always the story of that 5-cent part that shuts down that $1 million job. And the problem is, it's a lot of reaction. It's all of a sudden that didn't show up on the dock. Now you're trying to figure out and backtrack why it's not there. Wouldn't it be great to be on top of that in the beginning and be more proactive? That's what our system's going to allow you to do. And at the same time, it's going to streamline all of this information flowing back and forth between the systems because of the integration, which is going to reduce the steps that your team has. It's going to reduce errors that happen when people are manually entering info into the system. And as I mentioned, it's also going to give all of your suppliers a real-time scorecard so they know where they sit against your key metrics.
Question.
Yes.
This is John Duffy from Gatan. So you're relying on your suppliers to enter this data into the system. If your supplier does not enter the data into the system, we don't have an update. Is that correct?
Yes. Correct. The suppliers would be interacting in the platform. That is correct. They would be receiving notification that there is a PO that they need to take action on, which they can click into that. It will drive them into the system that I'm about to show you, and that's where they can simply acknowledge and or suggest changes to the PO.
Thank you.
Yep. So before I jump into that, I just have a couple quick slides, but once again, we owe our success to groups like PeopleSense, partners like PeopleSense, who have brought us in to meet with their client base and partnered with us. And we've just grown tremendously over the last 6 years. We've recently gone past the 100 client threshold. And if you look at this map, this is by no means a map of all of our clients, but I just wanted to point out a couple on here. We're a completely scalable platform. So whether you have one buyer and 10 suppliers that you're working with, or you're a company like Dell or JBT or Gillig, publicly traded, multi-billion-dollar organization that has hundreds of buyers and thousands of suppliers, we're a scalable solution. We work for all sizes of organizations. And then everything that I'm going to show you today, for the most part, is available mobily, so that your team could be utilizing your mobile devices, whether it's iOS or Android, whether you're in the shop, in the warehouse, at home, traveling. All of this can be done for the most part on your mobile devices. So with that, that's really the quick and dirty overview of SourceDay, why we exist, and the challenges we set out to solve. And now what I'd like to do is actually put it in action and show you the platform and give you a sense of what your teams would be utilizing for the buyer-supplier communication and collaboration.
And hey, this is Colby. I'm going to just jump in. There's a question on the chat. So the question is, what about overseas suppliers? So this is Colby with SourceDay. And we absolutely support all overseas suppliers. I would say pretty much every one of our customers has at least one supplier somewhere overseas and many in Asia. We are well-versed in supporting and training in any native language that's needed, and the platform itself translates into any native language. So fully expect there to be international suppliers. The last thing I'll say with international suppliers, you do have the ability in SourceDay to manage by ship date. Chris is going to walk you through, all communication on delivery date. We do have the ability where if you need to manage specific overseas suppliers by when it's going to be shipped, that is in the solution.
Excellent. Thank you, Colby, for jumping in on that one. So everybody should see my screen right now that says purchase orders, and if you look towards the left-hand corner, it says demo buyer. So I am looking at this as one of your buyers, and I'm going to walk through this platform and this dashboard, explain what's in it, and as we talk through this, I'm going to bounce between being a buyer and then interacting in the platform as a supplier. But I'll start here as a buyer, and the first thing I want to point out is that all of this information that you see coming across, the vendor, the order status, PO line, quantity, cost, all of this is data that we would be pulling directly from your ERP. And this would be set up during the integration so that all of the content and information you need flowing into this system is going to be in our dashboard. We break down everything by PO, line, and release number, as well as if you're doing blanket orders, you can run those through the system as well. All of these columns that you see, very much like an Excel spreadsheet, I could click on one, go in, sort it, ascending or descending just by clicking into it. I also have the ability to go in and move within my system. I can move certain columns so that I can set this up for the look and the feel that makes the most sense for me. At the top, what we'll do is we will ultimately talk through all of these tabs, such as updates, awaiting response, late, radar, hot, shipped, complete. But what I'm going to start with is open and pending. So as I mentioned, the integration would take place, and that as a PO is released in your ERP, we would be picking up that content. Most, if not all, of the integrations that we have are on rolling 15-minute syncs to pull information. So the longest you would wait would be 15 minutes to see information populating on the platform. That is on the pull. When information is acknowledged and or changes are accepted by your team, that information is automatically written back into your ERP. And I'll walk through that as we get into the actual day-to-day transaction. So I've come into this today, and I have it set up right now with two buyers. We have Ken and we have Robert, and then we have an SA, think kind of a system administrator, a player coach, manager. What I'm going to do is actually operate like I'm that SA because I have work that's assigned to me. But what I'd like to point out is that you're going to dictate the rights, approvals, and authorities, and who has the ability to interact and manage which POs. I also want to point out that this is very valuable because let's say Ken goes out on vacation. Robert can easily pick up Ken's work with just a click of a tab and automatically see the POs that he needs to be focused on. And I'll explain through our audit features and tools how that when Ken comes back from vacation, he can just hit the ground running. But what I'd like to do today is start with PSA, since I have some set up for this particular demo. And so imagine that I've come in, I'm a buyer, and it's Monday morning, a bunch of POs, the workbench was run, and a bunch of POs have been released. I come in and I see that, okay, 39 POs are open that are assigned to me, and 39 of those are still pending. So I'm actually waiting for an acknowledgement or some type of change request from my suppliers. At the same time these POs were released and hit my system, those suppliers were given notification that they had a PO that they need to take action on. And then this is where the magic really starts. So those suppliers will start going in and either acknowledging those POs as price, quantity, and due date, everything is good to go, or they may be suggesting a change. But at this point, you're going to let that magic start to work, and then that's going to help dictate where you're going to spend your time. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to focus on, I'm going to sort this by PO column right here. We're going to focus on, pardon me, a particular vendor, Chromax, that we're working with. And we're going to focus on 4 PO lines, PO 5600 and PO 5700, which has 3 lines. You'll see that attached to PO 5600, there's a paperclip. And just as you would expect, a paperclip means that there's an attachment. So we have a module called SourceDay that if you have attachments that you need to add to POs, you can easily do this in the system. You could add an attachment by PO line, you could add it by PO, you could attach it to all vendors, or you can attach it by item. So let's say you have a specific drawing or spec that needs to go out by each item. You could actually set that up in the system so that it automatically goes out into something that that individual is going to see. If there are different revisions to that, you can submit something with another revision. We're going to break the old rev so that there's no confusion when something's been updated. Just another little perk here that it's going to give you that ability to attach directly to that PO. So what I'd like to do now is actually jump over and show you the supplier screen. And when I do this, the first thing that you're going to recognize is that it looks almost identical. And we've done that for a number of reasons, but the most important is transparency, so that as you're looking at data, exactly how your suppliers are looking at data. So with that said, and I'm sorry, just one more time, there's somebody with a lot of background noise. It might be on your phone. So if you've dialed in through the phone, you might have to mute on your phone. Thank you. And so I'm now the supplier looking at this, and I've come in and as a supplier, I may have multiple customers that I'm working with, and I can manage everything in this platform. As I said, that's the beauty of it, and that's a huge benefit. They would have received an email alerting them to the fact that there's a PO they need to take action on. They can click directly into that email, and it'll take them into the system, and or they could be living in the system. A lot of people will spend their day in here as they're working through things, and they would see what they need to focus on. So as a supplier, I know that I have 49 open POs, and 48 of those are pending because I've gone in and done a little work this morning. But what I'm going to do is focus on these 4 lines that I spoke about earlier. So I've got PO 5700, which is 3 lines, and PO 5600. Now, right now, I'm assuming, and this is what we hear from a lot of our client base, is that when you're communicating on a PO and a PO line with your suppliers, it's typically one email with a subject line for that PO line asking for an acknowledgement or changes. And so imagine you'd have 4 different emails that would have been sent for this, 4 different chains of communication to try and get back any type of acknowledgement or change. That all goes away. Our system allows them to do bulk acknowledgements. So I can go in here, I could select all of these POs. And if I knew as a supplier that, hey, price, quantity, due date, all of these are good to go, in one simple click, I could go in and acknowledge all of these POs. But in this case, we're just going to focus on these 4 PO lines. So I've selected these 4 PO lines, and I can go up to my actions. What I'm going to do is acknowledge these, but before I do that, I want to point out that you'll see something that says generate PO report. So right now, I'm sure your team is scanning the PO into a PDF, attaching it to an email, emailing that out. When a change occurs, they're getting, the question of, hey, can you send me the updated PO? All of that goes away. What we're going to do is mirror your PO in the system. And that PO is going to update as things update in the system. So there will always be an up-to-date copy that's available for generation in the system. And so I've gone in and I created, my reports, a PO. And so just so you can say, this is a dummy sample one, but that PO is going to pull in all of the information that's on your PO. We're going to make this look and feel, so it's going to mirror what your PO looks like. If there's any type of terms and conditions that need to be added, if there's certain information that needs to be on there for certain types of items, that's all going to be there. So just think of the time savings right there, but not having to manage the back and forth when it comes to POs. So very simple, very straightforward. I'm going to go back in, click on these 4 lines. As I mentioned, I can do bulk acknowledgments. So I could go in here, click acknowledge, and each one of these lines comes up with price, quantity, and due date, and the ability for me to either acknowledge or suggest a change. So let's look at PO 5600. Right now, quantity, item cost, due date, everything's spot on. As a supplier, I'm looking at that saying, yep, good to go, everything's going to be fine. But on these next ones, PO 5700, there's actually some things I need to suggest as changes back to you. The first is that there was a 2019 price increase on this particular item. On this item, there's actually a quantity minimum. And on this last item, these bicycles that are being built, we've had an issue with a group for lead time, and this is actually going to push back almost a full month. And so within 30 seconds, I've gone in and I've updated 4 lines. If you look to the top of the screen, you'll see where it says total POs processed successfully 4. So of those 4, one of them, price, quantity, due date, everything was spot on, good to go. That will automatically write back into your ERP that it's acknowledged, no changes. Now these other 3 that I suggested changes for, you'll see I now have something in my awaiting response box. So think of updates and awaiting response as my inbox and my outbox. So I now have 3 POs that I've suggested a change to as a supplier that I'm awaiting a response for. Now at that time, the buyer who is tied to those is going to be receiving notification that they have a PO that they need to take action on. There's been an update to it. So if I go in now, I have 39 that were open. As I know, 35 of those are now pending because 1 was updated with no changes, and now I have these 3 that are in my updates and or what I would consider my inbox. So this is going to tell me very quickly what changes are being suggested, and I can take action on those. The first way I can see this is I can hover over this notepad and see that, okay, there was a price increase, there's a quantity minimum, there's a lead time issue. What I can also do is scroll across, and everything that I see in red is a suggested change. And once again, these are purely suggested changes. Nothing's happened with these until you go in and either accept or reject those. So what I'm going to show right now is the accepting and rejecting. So maybe as a buyer, I say, oh, you know what? I totally remember seeing that memo. Yes, there was a price increase, and I remember the quantity minimum increase. So of these 2 lines, which it's going to give me a review again, in red, I see what the changes are. I can go and accept those. And when I accept those, what that's automatically going to do is update that in the ERP for that PO line. And it's very important I mention it's only for that PO line. We are not going in and updating any of your pricing tables. It's purely tied to that PO line. But in a matter of seconds, I went in and did that. I don't have to go back into your ERP and put any of this in manually. I don't have to remember to do that. It's all taken care of when I accepted those. Now, on this particular one, maybe this lead time issue is not something that we can deal with. And I'll talk about all these other actions in a little bit that you're seeing right here. But I'm going to go ahead and reject this one. And I'm just going to give a simple reason of no. But at this point, I'm going to reject this. And so what happens when I reject this? This is now in my awaiting response tab. So once again, think of that like my outbox. So I know I'm waiting on an action from the supplier, and that particular supplier is now going to be seeing this in their updates. And so usually at this point, especially when it comes to a lead time issue, this may be where you need to pick up the phone. So we're not going to eliminate every single phone call that had been taking place. But in this case, you're going to get farther down the path and know exactly what was being suggested. And you're also going to have an audit log and a history on that, which I'm clicking right now into the history as to when this change was actually suggested, who looked at that change, who rejected that change, and what they said. And so our audit log is a very, very powerful tool in the system. As I mentioned, I'm sure every single person on this phone is sat in a meeting and somebody said, who approved this? When was it approved? And how did this happen? And you couldn't find all the documentation around it. That all goes away. You're going to have documentation of every single touch point within that PO from the time it's firmed and released till it's shipped and received by your organization. At your fingertips, easily right there. So what I'm going to do is jump back into my buyer side and look at purchase orders. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit more. So as I mentioned, Ken and Robert, so I'm in this as the SA, but we talked earlier about Ken going out on vacation. Well, when Robert takes over for Ken, if he has anything that's in process, that's either waiting for an update or awaiting a response, he can go directly in and just look at that audit log, and he can see every single touch point and what's happened. So he doesn't need to receive a download from Ken. Likewise, when Ken comes back from vacation, he can just pick up where he left off and see where he needs to focus on items that are either in a waiting response or particularly possibly wait or radar. So he doesn't need to go to Robert to ask for that data. It's already there. If he needs a question answered, he can simply go in and look at the audit log. This is also incredibly powerful for management. We have two types of licenses that are built into the system. The first is a buyer license, which I'm in right now utilizing this as a buyer. So think of a buyer as somebody who has full access to do anything and everything within the system. We also have a viewer license, or what we consider a management license. And that individual has the ability to go in and do things like run reports, look at dashboards, subscribe to lines, view where the transactions are, but they can't take action on a PO. This is very, very important so that they can go in and see where things are. They could read an audit log, they could see what's still open versus what's pending. So a very, very powerful license in that management license. So what I'd like to do, that would be very just simple transaction, just a very simple day-to-day. But I'd like to get a little deeper into how this helps buyer focus his or her time.
Hey, Chris, before you move on, let me answer a couple quick questions that have come into the chat. So Raj asked, if the vendor agrees to participate, would you be able to pull their sales order info to match our PO and update this automatically, i.e. they wouldn't have to manually update their line items? Great question. So the vast majority of our suppliers use the solution like Chris just showed you to acknowledge, being able to do things in massive bulk efficiency and much more efficient than responding to one email at a time or spreadsheet updates. Now, having said that, we do have functionality that we have multi-billion-dollar suppliers like Grainger and Graybar and Avnet and Arrow using that allows them to import their sales order information straight into SourceDay, and we will automatically do that matching like you're saying to update that information back to you in an automated fashion so they don't have to do it like Chris just showed you. So that functionality is there with a file import. A great question. Then the next one, Sue asked, can the supplier or the buyer filter on the headers of each column of the report? I'm assuming the report meaning this view you're looking at, and absolutely. Each one of those headers are hyperlinked, which allows you to filter. And in addition to this filtering, each one of those columns you can hide or add additional ones or rearrange in any way you want. And then lastly, advanced search. You can hone in on exactly what you want to see. So by status, by item, by vendor, if you need to get really granular to look for some specific information. Great questions. Keep them coming in the chat.
Excellent, Colby. Thanks for handling those. I realized I had my thing hidden, so I'm not seeing those pop through, but wonderful. And as he mentioned, yeah, if you need clarity around what I'm showing, please jump in with a question. So to get back to where I was going with this, you know, as a buyer, I've come in here, I've just seen how a really standard transaction goes through. But what happens, you know, if something's late or something needs my immediate attention? How does this take place? Well, I'm going to go in this now and look at this as Ken. And so when Ken comes in the morning, he's going to look at this and see right away, I've got 45 open, 44 of those are pending. But let's talk about a couple of these other tabs now. He has 3 that have shown up in his late tab. So the way that things hit our late tab is if your team, you know, by that due date has not marked that as received in your ERP, that's automatically going to hit this late window. And so when Ken comes in, he knows that these 3 items, they're late. This could shut down a production line. This could cause issues with a big client. This could have huge downstream ramifications. I need to jump on these immediately and take care of them. So it's helping him focus his time and where he needs to be. So within that, as I mentioned, just how they could do bulk acknowledgments as a supplier, I can go in there and do bulk notifications as a buyer. So on these 3 lines, I can go in, and you should see right here that this is actually multiple suppliers too. It's Chromax and it's Grip Tape Supply. So it doesn't have to be just one supplier I'm reaching out to right now. It's all of them with my late lines. I have the ability to do something called a hot. So I can go in here and automatically send these individuals a note saying, you know, I need, you know, ASAP update on these lines. And I've now marked these as hot. So what's immediately going to happen, you'll see that the icon comes up with a fire, but those suppliers are going to receive notification that they have something that's hot and it's late and it's urgent and they need to take action on it. What it's going to do is also, if you see this hot tab here, think of this as your expedite tab, so that anything you're expediting has now been segmented and you know where you're focusing on those hot items. So these are all things that have been sent out to the supplier that they need to take action on. If I look at this as a supplier and those purchase orders, I'm going to see, you'll see these flames here. So I can't miss them. I know something's going on. And I also know that I now have 2 things showing up on my hot and 2 things showing up in my late tab that I need to take action on. So this helps the buyer focus their time when something's late. But the problem with that is that it's very, very reactive. And so as soon as we introduced the late tab, we started getting queries about, hey, that's great, but what if I could take care of this before it became late? And so that's what led to the radar tab. And so as Colby alluded to earlier, let's talk about an example where you've got somebody in China and maybe they have a, you know, 35-day, maybe they have a 6-month, whatever it may be, lead time to get something shipped over to you. And, you know, them telling you 3 months ago that, hey, this is good to go, this is going to be on time, versus it actually being the day before it's supposed to be there and showing up are 2 very different things. So what the radar tab allows you to do is, just as it's named, set up a cadence for communication to put those groups on a radar. So maybe you have somebody who is, you know, close to you, they're US based, but they're a little bit of a problem child. What you want to do is make sure that 3 days before anything is due, they're re-acknowledging that initial acknowledgement. So you can set them up that they have to do that. Maybe for one of those overseas suppliers, you know, starting 1 month out, you want them to acknowledge every single Monday leading up to when that part is supposed to be on your dock, that yes, it's on time, yes, it's on time. Or in the case of, hey, this is when it ships, and we know that it's typically 3 weeks, you know, on a freighter. So, hey, it shipped, we're good to go. This is when it should be getting to you. But it gives you that ability to proactively focus on these. And as I mentioned in our ROI analysis, this is where we see that increase in on-time deliveries of 35 to 60%. It's due to functionality like this, so that you can get ahead of those late lines before they become late. Now, when something is shipped, what I'm going to go through as a supplier is show you a particular PO line, and I'm going to go in and say, you know what, this is ready to go. This one was hot. Oops. Let me do one that we've had here. What am I looking for here? Oops. Looking for one to ship. And when I click into ship, what it's going to do is pull up my shipping tab, and it's going to allow me to put in the pertinent information as the supplier. In this case, I'm shipping 250 of these. It's one lot. It's one shipment. Everything fits in one box. And we are tied into the bigs right now. So, you know, FedEx, UPS, DHL, everything you see there, we have direct connectivity to. We also work with a group called Aftership, which has API access to about 480 other shippers and couriers. And if you have somebody that you work directly with, you know, a 3PL or some type of shipping company that has an API, we can pull that data and that information in. So in this case, you know, it could be FedEx. I'm just going to make up a number right now, and I mark that as shipped. So what that's going to do is show up in my shipped tab. And so I've gone and I've shipped these. And so I know this as a supplier. But one thing I want to point out is in my shipments, I have a couple I did earlier, is that I can see all the information on those particular shipments. And here's one that I actually sent earlier. I can click into that real tracking number. And this works both as a supplier and as a buyer. And I can see what's happening on that particular transaction. So in this case, I can see when that is actually shipped, where it is in process. And this one's already been delivered. But you would be able to see all that data as it's being submitted to us by those carriers. Now, when I go back to the shipment, I'm showing this to you on the supplier side because I want to point out another key feature of the platform, and that is our barcoding label. And I don't know how many of you on the phone are utilizing barcoding today or may have it on your roadmap, but we have this technology built directly into the system. And typically what has prevented suppliers from doing any type of barcoding in the past was they had to buy special software and they possibly had to get special printers like a Zebra printer. That all goes away. This software is built into the system. Once again, this is all being provided to the supplier at absolutely no cost to them, and this prints on a normal printer. So if it's something that you're doing today, your suppliers can automatically step right in and start doing this. If this is something that's on your roadmap, you can start to roll this out because it's available to your supply base. Now, let's say the supplier goes in and prints this label, or let's say they forget to put the label on and the box goes out, or they do put it on and it gets torn or damaged. As a buyer, I have the ability to go in and look at that data as well. And I can go in and see the ASN, which I'm going to click into here, which had that same tracking number. And I can go in and print that label as well. So let's say this box shows up on your dock, doesn't have a label, or as I mentioned, it's torn. I can go in there and create this label as a warehouse agent individual who may have access. So lots of flexibility built into the system around that. I'm going to jump back to purchase orders real quick. And if we look to the top, I'll hit on a few of these items, but a couple of them are better left outside of the demo. But the first is going to be dashboards and reporting that I want to talk about. And so dashboards, think of this as real time. So it's the ability to go in and set up a dashboard so that maybe I want to know what my top worst performing items are, or my PO lines that are most late. I can add these to a dashboard so that I'm always having visibility into them. This is important not only for a buyer, but this is also something that a viewer license would be doing as well, somebody who's in management, because they want to keep tabs on these. So think of dashboard as real time. This is happening in the now. Reporting is past tense. It's what occurred. I want to run these reports. So every single report that you're seeing here was created because a client came to us and said, this is important data for us. We need you to create a report. So if we have the data in our platform, we can create a report around that. It's currently something that we would have to create for you, but all of these reports can be run, and there's multiple formats, but typically you could download this into an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF. So maybe you want to pull off one of these reports for an upcoming meeting. You want to massage some of the data because you're adding it to some slides. You can do that very easily from the system. Now, something else you'll see up here is a quality module. So I want to point out that we have two modules that I won't be talking about today as part of this demo, but could be something for future reference. And the first is quality, so that if you're looking for a way to manage quality, we have a module that allows you to do that. I'm going to touch on how that's important and that data flows into our scorecard. And then we also have an RFQ module that we've recently released. So if you are doing RFQs with your supply base, my sense is that's probably very manual, or it's on spreadsheets and it's not all bundled up in one location. We can actually do that for you. We have a module which can make that very, very simple, streamlined, and give you the visibility that your team needs. So just getting back to quality and what I briefly talked about is that if you were to use the quality module, we would capture that data and pull it into the scorecard. So I've alluded to the scorecard quite a bit throughout the lead-in. And what I'm doing now is I'm jumping into the scorecard for Chromax. And so our scorecard is based off of 4 elements. Currently, those 4 elements are on time, quality, price variance, and responsiveness. Now, each one of these elements, you dictate what those parameters are. So your team dictates what on time is. Maybe on time is nothing more than 7 days early because it ties up your warehouse, and nothing more than a day late. And on time to you is one of your most critical factors. So that's going to apply 50% to that overall grade. Quality, as I mentioned, our quality module. So if you're logging failures, we're going to capture that information and you're going to dictate what the value is based on that percentage of failures. Now, if you have a separate quality module that you may be utilizing outside of SourceDay, we could look to pull that information in and populate that quality portion off of what you're utilizing today. Price variance, very, very self-explanatory. What changed, up or down on the particular PO from the time it was sent. But really, the big one is responsiveness. And right now, responsiveness is very, very subjective. It's typically based off of feeling or where things have occurred. And I guarantee that if you went to 2 of your buyers, anybody on the phone, and asked them about a particular supplier, you might get 2 different answers. One may say, Joe at ABC is awesome. He gets back to me immediately. I have a great relationship with him. We're talking about his kids all the time. Love him. He's amazing. And you talk to one of your other buyers and they say, Joe at ABC never gets back to me. I always have to track him down. It seems like it's a chore. Well, that's all very, very subjective. That all goes away. So responsiveness is now going to be based on when they've been notified that that PO is out there and they need to take action on it, to when they're actually taking action. So in this case, there's a responsiveness score that is the average time to acknowledge that PO when it first comes through. But then let's say there's a change to the PO or something that needs to happen. It's important that they're on top of that as well. And so there's a second feature to that, which is the average time to update the status inquiry. And all of this is going to lead to that responsiveness figure, which all tie up into the overall grade. As I mentioned, living, breathing scorecard available 24/7. This is something that you can choose to share with your suppliers so they always have access to it, or it's something you can choose to not show your suppliers. Now, if you chose not to show your suppliers, what you would typically be doing, at least what we've seen our clients do, is they may be sitting down with their suppliers for QBRs. And so they may be pulling date ranges, which you could do and say, let's look at your Q1 versus where you are in Q2. And let's figure out why your on time slipped. Let's figure out why, all of a sudden you used to get back to the same day, but now it's next day. So this puts more power in your hands and gives you something where you can focus on managing that supplier and giving them something to manage themselves too.
So a couple quick questions I'll address before you finish up. So there's a question Andy asks, is there a way to add columns for tracking shipping costs? It's a very good question. So depending on exactly how that information is getting to you, if the suppliers are providing you shipping costs, that ASN modal that is there for your suppliers to provide the ASN data, we could absolutely add a field for shipping costs. If that shipping cost is in the carrier, your freight forwarder's website, and we can access it via an API, we could pull it in there. So there's a couple ways that we could get that for you, but we just need to understand kind of how you're getting that today. David asked another question, are there canned reports or do all reports have to be made, and is there a service fee associated? So if you click that report, Chris, just to pull up the canned reports, all the reports that you see here are available to all customers. These are the ones that customers have asked for, and so we've built them. These are canned for you to use, on day one. If there's reports that you do not see here that you want, then there's a couple things that we do. If it's a report that we think all our customers will need and want, and you can wait for it, we will develop it for free on our roadmap. If it's something you want right away, there'll be a small cost associated for it. We're not talking about a lot of money. Great questions, and again, throw them in there as they come up.
Excellent. Thank you, Colby. Appreciate that. As we're getting down to the last couple of minutes here of my presentation, because I want to leave some time at the end, just if we have other questions that come up. A few things I just wanted to point out as we finish up. Something I alluded to earlier were different actions that could be taken from the platform. And so when I go into the Actions tab, we've already done a couple of these. We've toggled something hot. We've accepted and rejected a particular change request. But I could have the ability to notify all my vendors of something, and maybe it's something as simple as, hey, overseas suppliers, please remember that the Friday after Thanksgiving in the U.S. is a holiday, and we're going to be closed. Or it could be some other type of notification that you're sending out. You could also just do a note to a line. So let's say you had a conversation with somebody and they called you, and instead of having that documented in multiple different fashions, you could just say, I'm going to put a note, attach it to this line that I talked to Tom, and here's what Tom told me. And it's directly associated with that line, goes into the audit history, so that once again, it's all there in one place. But the key one that I want to focus on is subscription. And so, as we mentioned, a viewer license or a management license, that individual typically wants to know what's happening on particular items, because they, as I said earlier, could have downstream ramifications if something changes within the whole organization. So if you were to go talk to your buyers, if they're like buyers who come onto our platform, they'll say something to the effect of, yeah, 30% of my time is spent answering internal questions for my team about a PO. Is it still on time? Has anything changed? Anything you need to tell me about this? Well, that can all go away through subscription. So it could be a management individual. It could be somebody in a completely different department that has a license that could go in here and subscribe to a particular line. So anytime a change happens to that line, they are going to be notified of that, which eliminates all that back and forth, all that reaching out, and further gives time back to your buying team in their day because everything is streamlined and automated. One of the last pieces I want to touch on right now is if we see where it says vendors and SourceDay in green, and I have that checked in the non-SourceDay blue. As I mentioned, when on the lead-in, we may have a couple suppliers that are technology averse and don't come up on the platform for you, or they get 1 or 2 POs a year. This is my demo environment, so that's why the name is the same as Chromax. But in this case, this is someone who chose not to come on, but I'm still receiving that data. As that PO has been firmed and released, it's still hitting the platform. And as a buyer, I'm still able to go in there and see that these POs are outstanding. And what you could do is download this data to a spreadsheet. You could easily use this if you're doing call logs to them. So you still have a way to manage those, onesie twosies that didn't come onto the SourceDay platform as a supplier. But the bulk of your time, you can look at these both ways. So you're going to see green and blue. But the bulk of your time is going to be spent in the platform, helping it dictate where you need to focus your efforts as to those POs and where your time should be spent. So with that, we're down to the last 5 to 10 minutes, and I've really gone through the bulk of the platform at a high level. Something that we'll talk about after this with the team is that if there are need for deeper demos or specific demos tailored to your environment, we're more than happy and open to do that, working through Brian and Gary. So I think, are there a couple more questions that came up, Colby?
Yeah, we just had one come in from Raj. A good question. Is there an Outlook integration, i.e. can emails be somehow tagged to the PO or PO line item, or at least be able to drag an email from Outlook to a PO or line item? So that does not happen today in SourceDay. automated emails are sent to buyers and suppliers notifying them when action needs to be taken, but the communication is occurring inside of SourceDay as opposed to emails. What you absolutely can do is you can tag documents to PO and PO line items, and that's done as simple as a drag into SourceDay and a tag to that item or purchase order or supplier. But there's not a direct integration straight from Outlook or Gmail.
Just totally mentioned, easy drag right into this area, and anything I have up here, I could go in and choose what to attach that to, PO line, item, or vendor. I received a question that I think just came directly to me, but I hope it's open to be answered for everybody. It's related to, you know, after PO is closed out, there's an issue with getting invoices from the suppliers, and if there's a module for that. We are working on an AP module that would do three-way matching and voucher invoices to POs. This is something that we're testing out with a couple of ERPs and clients right now in what I would call beta plus. You know, it's been proven it works. We're just getting it fine-tuned. But this is something that's on the roadmap and coming to everybody towards the end of this year. Excellent. Well, I really don't have anything further to cover. Colby, anything that I failed to jump into today that you think I should?
Yeah, great. No, this was a perfect overview. You know, we're very happy to continue the discussions around how we can help you guys automate and digitize your PO management environment. Invoicing is not order. Well, that's eliminated because we're giving them a living, breathing look into your ERP environment as the latest and greatest PO. In addition to that, we make sure that every update you want in the system regarding price and quantity is written into your system, therefore eliminating mismatching in that regard as well. So a lot of immediate benefits for invoicing that we do for what we'll call kind of data integrity. A couple more questions we have regarding costs. So our cost is based on the number of users you have. So the number of buyer accounts that you have in the solution is what our pricing is based off of. We're a SaaS organization, so you pay annually per number of buyer accounts, and that allows you to bring on an unlimited amount of suppliers. And we support and train all buyers and all suppliers, and you know, each supplier can have as many users as they need. So that's how the pricing structure is. And then Jeff asks, would received documents be saved in the system as well? So the documents that are shared back and forth between buyers and suppliers are absolutely saved in the solution. And they are not just saved in the solution, but they're saved to what they're associated to, whether it be the PO or an item. So they'll live in the platform for anyone who has access to the solution to see. Great questions. And maybe, you know, I know we each have a few minutes left, so maybe Chris and I will hang on until the end if anything else pops up. But if you don't have any questions, you know, like Chris said, I think we're finished with the webinar today. We will be in touch to see if there's any follow-up questions, comments, and, you know, hopefully we have the opportunity to speak with many of you.
Exactly, and I'll just turn it back over. I've unmuted, so Brian or Gary, I don't know if you want to chime in as we wind down here, but I just wanted to, once again, thank you both for having us on today.
One more question here. Is Did you see from David Ruhlman there?
Yeah, so David is asking, if a subscription is terminated, can you export data? Absolutely. You own this data. This is your information, and all of the data can be provided to you at any point in time.
Wonderful. Once again, Gary and Brian, thank you so much for inviting us to this webinar and bringing everybody together. I appreciate everybody's time on the line, on the phone, and online. You spent this hour with us. And as Colby mentioned, we'll stick on for a couple minutes if there are any other questions. But if not, we'll jump off here in the next couple minutes.
Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Doesn't look like we're going to have any others.
Yeah, well, Andy just asked, how can I get a copy of the recorded session? Yeah, so we did record it. Brian has it.
Right.
So Brian can distribute.
It will be on the website probably by Friday. And you can just go right onto our website, PeopleSenseERP.com. Then go to products, and then when you come down to the SourceDay icon, and then you, on the bottom of the SourceDay page, you'll find the connection to the recording. And it should be on sometime before Friday.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Well, this is Chris Wright. I'm going to sign off. Looks like there's only a couple of attendees left. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will talk soon.